Welcome, class. All right, so today we're going to continue learning about the French and Indian War, but first I want to show you how I want you to organize your notes for the day. So let's say this poorly drawn monstrosity is your sheet of paper. What I want you to do is, at that top portion, you'll put French and Indian War. All right, and then what you're going to do is, pretty close to that red line that goes down the side, you're going to put another line. Okay? And from here to here, you're going to write what's at the top of each slide. So, for example, the first slide is background. So you'll write what's at the top. Okay? And so you would write right here, for one, background. And then you'll take your notes here, however many notes you want to take. Remember, you don't have to write it word for word. Just take what's important. Putting it in your own words is going to help you remember anyway. And then once you're done with that section, you go number 2. And then the next headline, and you take your notes. All right? And we'll just keep going. At the very bottom is where you're going to summarize all of your notes. And I will tell you how to do that when we get there. All right? So today we're looking at, like I said, the French and Indian War. We're going to look at the thing in its totality. And again, you do not have to write this word for word. If you're listening and you're paying attention to what I'm saying, you can shorthand and summarize what is on the board itself. So, the background, again, this is what your number 1 would be. And this is what would go on the side. European countries are constantly fighting each other. Up until about World War II, this is always true. They seem to constantly be at odds, bickering, fighting over something. They're constantly fighting with one another. And at this time, they're fighting to try and control as much land as possible, because the more land you had, the more resources you had, the more you could trade, the more money you made. And so, at the time, in England, there is a triangle of hatred. There's 3 countries specifically that seem to always fight and hate one another. England, France, and Spain. And you can see, makes a triangle. And they seem to always be bickering. They're the 3 major countries, the major players in the world at the time, and they're just fighting to be the top dog, to remain on top. All right? And so they're fighting because there's a success secret in the 18th century. It's math. More land plus more trade plus more gold or resources, this could be resources, equals more wealth. And if there's more wealth, then that means there's more power. And again, this is what we call mercantilism. And mercantilism drives the world at this time. And so the colonial land grab, the colonists that are already here are bumping into each other. They're constantly exploring each other's lands. They're claiming each other's lands. And so, as you can see, that's going to turn into a fight. Those of you with siblings ought to know. You ever had your siblings say, "No, this is my shit. This is my shit." And you start claiming each other's stuff? Or little siblings are the worst. They're like, "That's my toy." If you've ever watched your little younger family members, "That's my toy." "No, that's my toy." And they just start claiming stuff, whether it's theirs or not. And it leads to bickering and fighting. And all that's what's going on in the colonies. Your French colonists are claiming land that belongs to England. English colonies are claiming land that belongs to Spain. Spain's doing it back. England's doing it. And it's just constant. They're bumping into each other. They're hitting each other. They're colonizing in the wrong places. They're claiming each other's stuff. And the group that gets forgot about are your Native Americans. And they're constantly caught in the middle because, really, it's their land. It's not England's. It's not France. It's not Spain's. It's theirs. They were there first. England and the Europeans just kind of showed up and was like, "Hey, we like this." And they took it. And so the French had set up ports right here along the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. And this angers the English because it makes it harder. As you can see, the 13 colonies are right here. They can't really expand out because these ports and these forts are there. And the French essentially are threatening to fight if the English try to continue to expand. And so there's an irritation in France. And if there's an irritation in France, there's an irritation among the French colonies, and that is France starts to build forts around this area, again, to try and keep the English out. And the reason they want to do this is that they have access to lots of animals, which allows them to create fur or hunt and gather fur. And they're very good at this fur trade. They're doing very well in the fur trade with the Native Americans. They have a much better relationship with the Native Americans in this region than the English do. And as a result, that relationship is starting to get better, and France is starting to become more powerful and make more money. And the English are like, man, we want to do that. France controls land all the way from Ohio, up there where the Great Lakes in Michigan were. And I'll show you on this map. From here, all the way down to where present-day New Orleans is. All right? And so from the north all the way to the south, and they want to expand into western Pennsylvania, which, again, if we look at this map, the 13 colonies have control of. These are British colonies, and France wants to push into where Britain is, and Britain wants to push into where France is, and as you can see, it's just a nice little melting pot of frustration. All right, and so France wants to control, already has a large chunk of land. You saw it on the previous map. They want even more. England is like, man, you got enough. Why are you trying to take from me? We want more. And they just start fighting back and forth, back and forth. And so George, old G-Dub, George Washington, gets things. Virginia was part of that land too. And George Washington is a major player in Virginia. He's a very wealthy, affluent planter and farmer in Virginia. He also is a member, a lieutenant in the Virginia Militia, which is a volunteer army. And he's a volunteer soldier. He's a lieutenant in this group. He has a high position of power. He's very wealthy and affluent, and he is friends with the governor of Virginia at the time, leader. And so the governor sends George Washington and his militia to the PA, which is Pennsylvania, to build a road. And the goal is to build a road through those mountains so that they can expand Virginia. They can make Virginia a larger colony. And remember that this road would help them claim this land as Virginia's. And as you saw in the map, this is going to anger the French because the French are already there. And so now the French and the British are trying to claim lands that each one feels is theirs. And so this animosity and this tension that already existed in Europe is now starting to emerge and manifest itself in the New World. And so the governor at the time, Dinwiddie, orders Washington to show up, tell the French, leave, get out. Get out. The French are already there. The French have already driven out all the Native Americans. They've already set up camps and things like that there. And the governor says, George, get on that horse, take your soldiers, and tell them to move. Obviously, the French are not going to take this very well and very lightly. The militia kill a French ambassador by mistake. An ambassador was a person that was just coming over. They were supposed to report back to France what was going on. They killed this ambassador by mistake and only increases the tension. France believes it's on purpose. The English claim that no, it's just a mistake. French forces in this region outnumber George Washington and the Virginia militia. So this is how they argue that's a mistake. Why would we do that? You greatly outnumber us, probably more than 2 to 1. We are not trying to fight you right now. We just need you to leave. We were here. We claimed it. Bye. So George Washington, understanding that he's outnumbered, understanding that tensions are high, kind of sees the writing on the wall and feels like there's probably going to be a conflict at some point. And he builds a fort, and he calls it Fort Necessity because it was a necessity. They needed some place that they could set up in the event that a battle broke out, that this tension overflowed. And the French forces actually captured George Washington. They captured George Washington. And instead of holding him, send him, release him back, because they believed that the embarrassment that Washington felt, or that the Virginia militia should have felt because they were at their own fort, overran so quickly, so easily, and their leader was captured, would have stopped the British. This is not a good idea. Why would you take the guy that is in a position of power and just return him right back and expect nothing to come of it? Obviously, we know George Washington as the first president of the United States, so history could have been greatly changed right here if someone's like, no. Do not release him back to the British. Make the British sign a treaty or something that says they're going to leave themselves, or we're going to keep him. Benjamin Franklin publishes this cartoon right here. And this is a fairly famous cartoon. 1754, and it urges the colonies to come together, to unite. Prior to this, all the colonies are individual run regions. They all have different leaders, different governments, and so he puts this together, and he has this join or die thing at the bottom, and his argument is that, look, as long as we're all different run governments, we have different leaders, there's too many people in charge. We need to put an individual in charge of all of us. We need to come together. That's the only way we're going to be able to survive this. 7 colonies sent representatives to New York. 7 of the 13 sent colonies to New York. They're going to try to come up and devise an idea for a common government. They believe that of these 7 colonies, they'll be diverse enough to have an idea of what everybody wants. Not a single colony approves the Albany Plan. Not one single colony. They're not able to convince a single colony to approve the Albany Plan. When in fact, had they listened to Mr. Franklin, and all of these colonies come together, they would have been a much more powerful, a much stronger entity, making it very easy to fight back against the French. So let's start prepping for war. France sends several army regiments to defend what we call Canada. The Canadian territory, they want people there so that they're not overrun. Britain sends professional soldiers to the Americas, led by Edward Braddock. And Edward Braddock is supposed to take these professional soldiers, it's supposed to help train the volunteer soldiers and make them a more stronger, more united, more powerful group to fight back against the French army that is at the Canadian territory. Both Britain and France try to get the Native Americans to help them. We've talked about this previously. France is able to make alliances with groups that will fight. England is able to make alliances with groups that just agree not to take a side. Braddock leads 2,000 British troops and some colonial militia to the French fort of Duquesne in Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. And so at Fort Duquesne, it's about to go down. And he gets there, he is just absolutely destroyed. He is dying at Fort Duquesne. And so news of Braddock being defeated gets back to England. It gets back to London. People in France, it's like,
ha, y'all got whooped up on back in the colonies. You sent one of your best generals down there. We still whooped up on you. Ha, 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 ha. Britain is like not wanting to be, Britain is all upset that they just got whooped up on. And now they want to retaliate. They're like, oh, yeah? Okay, well, now we're not fighting in the colonies anymore. We coming straight to you. We coming to France. And this starts the beginning of the 7-Year War in Europe. The 7-Year War arguably could have been called World War I because really it is a world war. France, Britain, Spain, they're all fighting. That's just in Europe. Then you got colonies fighting. You got Cuba, the West Indies, India, the Philippines. You got 4 or 5 continents fighting in the 7 Years' War. The declaration of the 7 Years' War proves disastrous in the beginning to Britain and the British colonies. But William Pitt gets in charge and becomes prime minister, and he starts changing the way things are done. And as he's changing the way things are done, Pitt wants Britain to win the war at whatever cost. And Britain goes deeper and deeper and deeper into debt to do whatever they got to do to win this war. No matter how much money they had to borrow, no matter how much, it didn't matter. It was about winning at all costs. And say they go deep and deeply into debt. He sends all of Britain's best generals, troops, all their navy squads, all to the colonies because we about to throw down and we gonna do whatever we got to do to win this thing. William Pitt, if you've ever seen a sports movie, is like that coach who gives the real inspirational speech before the underdog team goes and wins the whole thing. William Pitt is that guy. And it is this overwhelming strength that allows Britain to win the war. The fact that he sends everyone to the colonies allows him to very quickly take out France. And so you're going to see this on your homepage, your Canvas page, the causes and the effects. But it leads to the Treaty of Paris. And the Treaty of Paris is called the Treaty of Paris because it's signed in Paris. Signed in Paris, France gives Canada its land east of the Mississippi River. Let me rephrase. Canada gives its lands east of the Mississippi River to Great Britain. France, in what we call Canada today, gives that land to Great Britain. It gives the land west of the Mississippi River, including the Louisiana territory, to Spain. France loses all of its control in the region. But they do keep 4 Caribbean islands. Spain ends up giving what we call Florida to Great Britain, allowing Great Britain to have control of the entire East Coast. And so the results of the French and Indian War, Britain acquires more land. They become a superpower. They have all this land and all these resources, which again allows them more stuff to trade. The more trade you have, the more money you can make. So they become a superpower, but having to control all of these colonies becomes overwhelming. They're tired of trying to, what they call blundering and dealing with these colonies. And the cost of having to defend the colonies becomes overwhelming because, again, they're already in debt because that prime minister said, win at all costs. No matter how much debt we go into, we're going to win. But now you got more colonies that you have to be in control of and defend when they're in danger. For the French, they lose almost all their land. So if you look at this map, this right here, that's in this reddish color, becomes British land. This becomes Spanish land. They were no longer important in the American development. Things changed. All of their colonies in the Americas are pretty much gone. The Native Americans' result is that they continue to lose land. They're losing land and control. Mind you, they were here first. It doesn't matter. These colonies are fighting over land that is theirs. They're fighting each other. And the Native Americans, the ones that chose to fight, happened to pick the wrong side. And so you can see the map changes. The map changes. All of this that's in orange in this map was before the French and Indian War and the Treaty of Paris. You can see there is no orange now. They lose that land. They lose that land. For the colonists, they acquire land and allows them to expand. They gain valuable military experience. And they have their first American hero. They don't have to cooperate with each other. They realize that Benjamin Franklin might have been right. We do kind of have to get along, work together. And they begin to think of themselves as Americans. This is where it shifts. That before this, they thought of themselves as British. And after the French and Indian War, that mindset starts to change. They no longer view themselves as British, but instead as Americans. And then there's the Proclamation of 1763. And this is where Britain decides that we're going to show you how in charge we are. And the colonists are like, I don't know who you think you're talking to. We're not following that. The British are like, yeah, you're going to follow it, or else. And the colonists are like, or else what? We'll continue from there at a later date. Be sure that you check Canvas for your reading assignment for today. You can reach out to me if you have any questions. And as always, you have a great night.